I just noticed while taking my thumbnail how messy it looks behind me. I was gonna do this video in bed. As you can see, I've been working in bed for a little while. Actually, it probably just looks like I've been napping or something. And over here, I have my stuff from my suitcase strewn all over my couch. But you know what? What I love about this channel so much is feeling like it doesn't matter if I have a messy place. Like, I don't feel as compelled as I do with my other channels to like tidy everything up. Yeah, it is such a relief to, and maybe just like such an important point to notice is that it feels so relieving to be able to come on camera, or to allow myself, I should say, to come on camera and not feel a need to be perfect, to look perfect, to say everything perfectly, to have everything around me feel perfect, whatever that means. And that's, you know, an ongoing thought in my head. If you haven't yet, I encourage you to watch the video that I recorded, was that yesterday? 2 days ago, I think. It's a long one, it's over an hour. I had a lot to say. The first half hour of the video is me sharing details of my recent trip. And then after that, I talked about some of the things I learned about myself, and it's vulnerable in there. And first of all, I want to thank the people that have reached out to me privately after seeing that video. I received a really wonderful email from one of you, a text message from another one of you, and some great comments, and it's really wonderful to receive those, because videos like that, and many of the videos on this channel, feel so vulnerable. And it's interesting because I think a lot in my head about how I want to proceed with things in my career and all of that, and it's constantly on my mind. It's constantly thinking about what the next steps are, what I want to refine, what I want to continue, what I want to do differently. And one thing that I think a lot about is just being more and more authentic, because I tried for so many years to kind of like figure out the best strategy for things, for video content specifically. And I still am a very strategic person. If you didn't know this about me, I do a lot of business coaching. That's a huge, huge passion of mine. That's become a really big part of my business. And it's always just so interesting to examine the things that I advise other people, and then whether or not I do that in my own life. You know, a lot of the things that I teach others are based on my experiences, the learning lessons, and also things that I have been taught by other people, but I don't always implement the things that I suggest to other people, not because I don't want to or don't think that they're valuable. It's just that it's almost as if like there's two different people in my business. There's the I was gonna say the professional Whitney. There's the business coach Whitney, who is always thinking about strategy and all those things I just mentioned. And then it's like a completely separate person is the one that operates in my personal life and Eco Vegan Gal and that brand. And the reason they feel separate is because a lot of the things that I teach other people aren't things that I'm doing for myself. And again, it's not because I don't think that they work. It's just like they don't work, they haven't worked for me yet, or I don't really feel like doing them. A lot of times I like to teach other people the things that I don't like to do myself, if that makes sense. And it's interesting sometimes, because I'll almost like have an imposter feeling, like, oh my gosh, like if I'm not doing this myself, or I'm not having success with this myself, how can people believe that this actually works? Or who am I to teach these strategies that I'm not implementing myself, things like that. And I don't know, that's a barrier I have to overcome, because I recognize that a lot of people do that. A lot of people start out by teaching things that they haven't already mastered, because some of the ways that you learn to master things are by teaching it to other people. because you're practicing it, you're talking about it, you're hearing what works and what doesn't work for other people. So anyways, it's a bit of a side note. On that note, I actually had something completely different I want to talk about today, but there's something else that just occurred to me on this similar subject matter. I was talking to someone today about his career, and he wants, or I wouldn't, oh, how do I phrase this? He is an actor, but not a regularly working actor. And it's kind of like a cliche. When you live in Los Angeles, you're surrounded by people that have these big dreams in the entertainment world, and many people in this city haven't actually reached those goals. And it's really fascinating for me, especially because I used to want to be an actress, and I used to want to be a film director and work in this whole business, and that is a career that I pursued for many years before I started Eco Vegan Gal. And I have this kind of a few different perspectives on it. One is that I've been in that business, so I understand a lot of that business. I understand the desires, I understand a lot of the challenges, but I've also been removed from it for like 10 years now, so it's almost hard for me to even relate. And I have a number of friends that are actors, and it's really fascinating to me to see their journeys in the acting world and the ups and downs of it all. One of my friends is a working actor. I won't say who it is, but he's like kind of, I don't know. The word well-known really is relative, but he has been in a very successful TV show for a while and a number of guest stars on that. I have another friend, or more of an acquaintance, who you probably would know or recognize, who's had a lot of success. I've just kind of like met a bunch of actors that do, you know, roles. It might be recognizable, right? And then like my super close friends, one of them does a lot of commercial work, one of them does a lot of television work, and one of them is more interested in movies. And it's just so fascinating to hear their experiences. You know, some of them get roles all the time. Some of them have made it. Some of them are desperate for auditions, and every once in a while will get an audition, and every once in a while get really close to getting a role, and more than often they don't get what they want. And every once in a while they'll book something small and they'll make some money and they'll feel good about it. They'll do some work, but it's not really like hitting it for them. And then this person I was talking to today hasn't worked in a while and hasn't been sent out on auditions for a while and is just feeling really like jaded and frustrated. And hearing the mentality of somebody that kind of is in between not wanting to give up, like deep down, like wanting something, and maybe being afraid to say that they're giving up, even though in a lot of ways it feels like they have. But despite them not wanting to give up, they have all of these limiting beliefs that have gotten in their way, and have felt like they've been beaten down so much that it's really hard to get back up. And it's really interesting to me to hear other people share those things, kind of like from the outside perspective. Again, coming back to how I feel like two different people sometimes. Like I feel like I have this one side of me that's super positive and believes that anybody can do anything, and like feels like I can give advice to everyone and like guide people through. Like I have this very strong desire to help people. One thing I want to focus a lot more on is like how much I want to help relieve suffering. And I've never really put that into my like bio or resume or whatever, but that is like at the core of everything that I want to do. Is it's like my desire to help people suffer less, especially emotionally. And it's so hard for me to hear people to talk to people when they're feeling really low, when they're feeling depressed, when they're feeling hopeless, you know, all these emotions that many of us go through. And so I'm just like, action. Like anytime someone's telling me these things, my brain's like, oh, you could do this, you know, and I'm like, all I want to do is help them, you know, and then I have to learn how to balance that, because you know, not everybody wants help. Some people just want to share what's going on with them, but they don't really want to get advice. Like some people just need to like let it out, right? Kind of like what I do on this channel. And then the other half of me is very similar to all those people where while the one side of me is really good about seeing how to work through all these things and believing in things and being positive, there's also this side of me, and maybe not half of me, maybe this is less of a percentage, but there's a part of me that gets down just like these other people that I'm talking about and doesn't feels beaten down and not sure if, I guess I always feel like I want to get back up, but there are definitely times where I feel like that's such a challenge and I get just really down on myself and feel like I'm not good enough and all these things that I commonly talk about on this channel. And it's just so interesting to have like almost like a divided emotional state or brain or way of processing things. I think that's very common. You'll hear this with like therapists, actually this is talked about in this audiobook that I'm listening to right now, which has been so good. The author was talking about how somebody can be very good at one thing that they're teaching and helping other people with, but in their own personal life they're not very good at it, and how that can feel like this whole struggle because they'll feel like an imposter or something like that. And it's just such an interesting thing. Like, I just wonder psychologically how that separation happens. Like, how is it that you can know something but yet have really struggled to implement it? And I think that comes down to a lot of what I talked about in my last video over the weekend. For me, I'm really interested because of like my self-awareness, right? Like that is something I'm so grateful for because I've kind of trained myself to be very self-aware. So I know what a lot of my shortcomings are, I think. I'm sure there are some that I don't recognize yet, but I can like identify those things, and that's why it becomes really frustrating to have challenges, because you can see that the challenge is going on, but I don't always know how to get myself out of a challenge, right? Unlike that other side of myself. And I'm really committed to understanding all these blocks. And so in my last video, again, it's a long one, but maybe if you're going to watch it and you don't want to watch the whole thing, like skip to the halfway mark and watch from there on, because that's where all the like juicy like insight stuff comes in. What I talk about in that video is how I recognized on this past trip, visiting my family and doing business on the East Coast, that a lot of my blocks come from having a narcissistic mother, and how I was basically raised to never feel good enough and always want to be good enough. I was raised to feel like I had to work extra hard to get things, and that I wasn't good enough, so I had to overcompensate, and that I had to try to be perfect all the time, even though I never felt perfect and it felt like I never could be perfect. I really wanted it very badly. And these are all very common traits of daughters who were raised by narcissistic mothers. And so having that kind of like aha moment and looking like, oh, and suddenly it's like the dots are being connected for me, of looking back and seeing how I was raised and treated by my mother, and probably my dad as well. There's still things I need to learn about him, but a lot of the like pain that I have and the emotional blocks are from my relationship with my mom. And just I feel like identifying things are kind of the key to healing them. So I'm kind of right now in that identification phase, and then the healing is just a lot of letting go. And one thing that I want to do more of is something called tapping, or I think it's called emotional freedom technique, EFT, I'm almost positive is what it's called. It's something that I've known of for a few years. I think I learned about it about 3 years ago. And I was drawn to it because there's a lot of people that believe that tapping can help you become more successful because it releases old stuck energy. And the overall concept, the simplest concept that I'm based on what I understand of tapping, is that it taps on these acupressure points that store energy. And so you'll tap on various points like the top of your head, up here, the side of your eye, underneath your nose. I think I'm not sure if the chin is one, but I think it might be, and then the collarbone, and then the side of the hand, right? And so right now I'm listening to this whole audiobook about this, and it's like, I feel like almost everything the author's talking about in this book so far are things that I get stuck in, and I'm just like, okay, I think I'm finally ready to commit to tapping. And today is actually a pretty cool day. My big win for the day is that I restarted my high performance routine, and I'm actually doing a whole video on this for the main Eco Vegan Gal channel. I have a sponsor of like some supplements that I've been taking, and I was trying to think of like, well, how could I organically work them in? And the supplements that I have been taking of them are kind of all based in like optimizing my body. And you know, food is obviously a big part of how we heal ourselves, how we feel our best. But then there are all these other things that are wellness tactics, right? Hi, Ted, and also hi, Debbie. I saw your comment earlier. There are so many different things that we can do to really optimize ourselves to feel our best. And I think that I've just been so committed to feeling my best because I'm sure it ties back into like my old roots of wanting to be the best person I can be, and just being very drawn towards success. And it's actually really interesting saying those out loud. I was going to go one direction, but I'll take a tangent. So hopefully I'll remember to come back to my next point. But the tangent here is one of the things that's most fascinating about understanding yourself and coming back to like your roots and how you were raised is like, and I think I talked about this in the last video a bit, but just in case I didn't really get into it, one of the most fascinating parts of this is just wondering, what is your nature versus your nurture? Am I who I am because of how I was raised? Or is it because of like a soul, like my soul, right? Am I just who I am because that's who I am? Or am I who I am because of how I was raised and conditioned and programmed and all of these things? And it's kind of crazy when you think about it, like how much other people influence us. Especially for someone like me, I think my vulnerability is that I really want to please people because I didn't feel like I was pleasing my parents growing up, and I really wanted their validation. I don't think I've ever been like deeply validated by my parents. It's like choking me up just saying this. Obviously it's like a big pain point for me, but like to spend so much of your life like feeling like you do your best and it's never good enough. It's just like an ongoing thing. And so luckily that pain led me to what I do now and my desire to help other people relieve suffering, because I think if there is like that soul thing, or maybe like the wounded little girl in me is like I'm like, I don't want to cry about this anymore, I just want to talk. Through like, I think sometimes through our own suffering, through our own emotional challenges, we want to help ourselves, but we don't want other people to have to go through it. Like, at least that was my experience. And maybe that's part of my soul or my nature, whatever you want to call it, is just not wanting other people to go through the hardships that I experienced. And that to me is, I don't think everybody necessarily has that. That has a lot to do with empathy. And I don't know if like, again, is that nature or nurture? Like, was I programmed to have empathy? And I also don't know, like, do I want to help other people because I feel like I can't help myself? Like, is there a part of me that, and maybe this explains like the split, like, I don't want to call it personality, but split mindset or something, where like, it's almost like I don't believe that I can overcome things. So I like feel like, well, if I can't do it, I want to help other people do it. Like, I think that's probably a huge root of whatever stuck energy, old programming, like side of me there is. It's like, wanting to do for others what I couldn't do for myself. I'm not sure if that, I'm sure that makes sense, but I don't know if I've said it fully the way I intended to. It's interesting. And the other point, I guess, that I was trying to get to with that as well is like wondering like who I really am. And I think that's part of why I love doing this particular channel, is it's like an unraveling. And like I always say, like I hope that the reason you guys are drawn to this channel is not just to help me unravel, but for yourselves. Like I really hope that you're having healing here as well. It's so hard for me to know. I guess this comes back to this empathy thing, right, too. It's like I have such a strong desire not to be selfish, and maybe that's because I grew up with a narcissistic mother. Like part of narcissism is like a very selfish behavior. And so it's like I never wanted to be selfish, right? And it's I guess, like, so the comment just came through from BB who said, I think you just have self-doubt and you just need to build up your confidence. I think the word just is a really, like, it's such a simple word, but it's not that simple. People have brought this up. It's like, oh, it's so easy to point out when somebody doubts themselves, and you're like, oh, just snap your finger and stop doubting yourself. It's not that easy in my experience or my opinion, because it comes so deep down to these old wounds, right? And that actually, it's interesting too, because, when I was listening to my actor friend today talking about all of these experiences that he was going through, like it sounds so easy on the outside to be like, oh, well, of course you can do it. Like, just go do it. Like, of course this is possible. Just believe in yourself. Like, these are the things that we often feel as a perspective of someone on the outside. But on the inside, and I know this from personal experience, but also from studying psychology and just talking to other people, is that a huge reason people don't change is because they are deeply wounded from things from the past, right? And this is part of the reason why I want to start doing tapping, is like releasing these old wounds, clearing them, all of that. And one of the great things in this book that I've been listening to that was pointed out is that there are wounds that we may not even know are there until somebody asks them, like brings them up. It's like, hey, like, do you think that something like this happened? And she provided a few examples in this book. And I just started to sit back and go, that's really interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about it that way. Like, she was talking about financial wounds, like how we've had traumas in our lives that have led us to believe certain things. Like, that's just, it's so interesting psychologically as humans that when something happens to us, we build a belief system around it. Or if there are people around us that tell us certain things over and over again, even if those things aren't true, even if those things are just based in opinion, we will become, if we hear them enough, we begin to believe them as true. Most of us do. Like, psychologically, that is how the human mind works for most people, is that if we just repeatedly do something, repeatedly experience something, or repeatedly hear something, we begin to just believe that that's the way things are. And so with these traumas, sometimes it's one big thing that happens and we're like, oh, like that hurt so bad. I never want to go through that again. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to avoid it, right? And many of us have those traumas, and they might not seem big relatively, but relative to other people, but relative to us, they can be huge, and we may not even have identified them as being huge, if that makes sense. Like, that's kind of what this part of this audiobook was getting into, was like, we can brush things away because we're like, oh, like that wasn't that big of a deal. Consciously, it doesn't feel like that big of a deal, but unconsciously, it hurt really badly, and it created this whole ripple effect, right? And so it hurt, and we think, I don't want to experience that hurt again. I'm going to do whatever it takes not to experience that hurt, right? And so that's where it just becomes compounded, and it can cause us to have fear, it can cause us to have self-doubt, it can cause us to have insecurities, lack of confidence, it can cause, and all these things are basically the same, right? They're all basically rooted in fear because we're trying to avoid feeling pain. We're trying to avoid that emotional pain. We're, you know, as humans, we are like, one of the most common things is that if something hurts, we don't do it again, right? That's how we often learn psychologically. And so, you know, I think I've already made the point with this here, but it's like you get burned, and so you stop doing it or you try to do something differently. And I am somebody who's hypersensitive. And again, I think that's because of how I was raised. I think I experienced so much emotional pain growing up that I became like really concerned with what other people thought of me and what other people said to me and how people would criticize me. Like I'm so sensitive to criticism, but I was programmed to believe that criticism was real because of that's just how I was raised. It was like, oh, if somebody that I know, trust, and love is criticizing me, then it must be true, right? It must be true because they're the one that said them, and I've been, you know, we most of us are automatically trust our caregivers because we think they're taking care of us, they're keeping us alive, they're feeding us, they're paying for, you know, they're doing all the things that keep us alive. Either we trust them because that, you know, there's love there, or we trust them because we need to trust them in order to survive, right? Like that's just instinct right there. And so when those people that are taking care of us, that are helping us survive, are telling us things about ourselves, we just, or most of us, will believe that that's true. And we're around those people a lot, so they say things over and over again. We hear it so much. Again, we believe that it's true and all of that. And so for me, it's kind of going back and seeing all the things that I was told and then stepping back as an adult and saying, is this true? And I don't, as I said in the last video, like I don't view my mother as malicious at all. I don't think my mom was like, or other people around me, whoever they may be, it's probably not just my mom, right? But my mom is like the big source of wounding for me. I don't, you know, my mom does not strike me as a malicious person. I think my mom was also hurt, and it's like it's a domino effect, and it gets passed down, right? So she's got her own wounding and her own things that caused her to become the narcissist and the blah, 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 on and on and on, right? And it's like we have to break the cycle. That's what I want to do at least. And so anyways, there's so much here. I could go on and on because this is such a big thing for me. It's a big realization in my journey to heal all this and move forward from it. And it's just kind of like this uncovering, and it's emotionally really exhausting and draining. And I'm at this point now where I'm like just noticing so much of myself, and it's almost hard to trust myself at this point because I'm not sure, is it me believing things or is it the programming believing? And that's like the other crazy thing, right? Like going back to programming, like, are we who we are because that's who we are, the nature, or are we who we are because somebody taught us to be that way? I mean, that's such a crazy thing. When you start going down that rabbit hole, it's like, who are we really? And consciousness is such a fascinating thing. I'm curious what you guys think of Jim Carrey's recent big thing that got publicized in the media when if you haven't seen it yet, he went the red carpet. This is probably like 2 or 3 weeks ago now. He was interviewed on this one red carpet. It was for icons, like celebrating icons, and many people view Jim Carrey as an icon. You know, he's a very successful actor and entertainer, comedian, and he's had a big awakening in the past few years or so. And now he's speaking out about it, and it's caused a lot of interesting responses from people. And I have some mixed feelings about that specific interview, but I definitely think that what Jim Carrey is saying is a really important thing for us to hear. You know, we are not who we think we are, is part of his point, and many of us are in cultures that really emphasize superficial elements of ourselves. And so there's this, I think a lot of the anxiety and depression that we get as human beings is related to feeling very confused about who we are, feeling very confused about our place in the world, having all of these messages coming to us from family members and friends and teachers and media that are so conflicting. And we are often trained, programmed again, to have a lack of self and to not feel confident about ourselves, because that's part of how A, we are controlled, and B, how we're marketed to. If we don't feel good about ourselves, then we are always looking for a way to fix it. And how do we fix that? We often fix it by buying things, trying to improve ourselves. Like the self-improvement business is so huge. And it's like often not getting down to the root of who we are. So the nutshell that I have to say today, even though it's not exactly what I thought I was going to talk about, is that I would like to get to the root of who I am, because I feel like that is how I am going to feel my best, but also be my best and truly be able to help other people. So, yeah, I'm feeling emotionally sensitive, and, you know, another thing, though kind of the original concept of this video was like, because I'm digging down and identifying so many things at the root of who I am, I'm kind of easily triggered. And so sometimes like getting advice from other people is hard for me, because I think like advice is where my brain often goes when somebody gives me a suggestion, is my brain goes to, if they're giving me this suggestion, they're also probably telling me that I'm not good enough as I am right now, right? Like that's basically how I was raised, as my mother was always telling me, or maybe always is an exaggeration, but my mother was often telling me that I would be like, hey mom, look what I did. And my mom's most common reaction to this day is, oh, but you forgot to do that. Or, oh, but you didn't do that yet. Or, oh, but the choices you made here, I would have done it differently. Like, my mother was not the type that would be like, oh my gosh, that's so great. The only times that I can recall my mother telling me that I did a good job at something is if I did it exactly the way that she wanted it to be done. And oftentimes, because I wanted my mom's approval so badly, again, to this day, this still happens, I will do something that I know my mother wants done, and her reaction wouldn't be, oh my gosh, that's so great, which is what I desperately have always wanted to hear, but it would be like, oh, good. Meaning like, okay, you did what you should have, like, you should have done that anyway, so like, you don't really deserve praise because you did what you were supposed to do, right? Like, that's my mom's perspective on things. And so when I read people's suggestions, my brain will normally go to, if they're suggesting something, that means that I'm not good enough as I am, right? It's like when people tell me, oh, well, you know, you obviously have self-doubt, like, just switch that out. And then suddenly I'm like, oh, great, like, I doubt myself too much. It's like my brain just goes into this, like, it's like when someone pointing out that I have self-doubt, my brain will doubt myself even more, I guess, right? And I'm just like, just very sensitive to that at this point in my life. And it's a big thing. Okay, let me go through some of the live comments that have been coming through, because there's a lot. And thank you guys for being here live and saying so much. So BB said, to break down walls, you need to try to put that energy towards weaknesses and strengths from trial and error. Ted said, I also grew up with a very self-engrossed mother and never wanting to repeat mistakes I felt she made. Today I understand she just wasn't able to provide the kind of emotional support her child needed. Ted, if you haven't looked into narcissistic mothers, I think it's worth looking into, seeing if your mother was a narcissist, right? Diane said, have you heard of Gretchen Rubin's book that talks about the 4 tendencies? Just on an interview. I've read some of her work. I read one of her books last year, but I can't remember which one it was, so I will look into that. Liz said, hi Whitney, I've never had a good relationship with my dad and always choke up talking about it. Maybe the trauma he experienced as a child contributed to the type of father he was with me and my sister. Absolutely. That's why I'm like, this is a cycle, you guys. Like, I forget, maybe it was Debbie in my last video who was saying how committed she was to becoming a good mother, that she didn't like stopping the patterns, right? And so I think that the traumas just continue, and it's up to us to kind of break some of those cycles. Ted said, your talk today is helping me understand why I'm so sensitive to others' opinions. I'm really glad to hear that, Ted. Like, I feel like if I can help other people heal these things, like I said in the beginning, like it's really like one of my greatest joys. Katrina said, have you ever read The 5 Love Languages? I have. It's one of my favorite books, favorite subjects. My number 1 is quality time. I feel like I need to retake it though, because I've known for years that my top 2 love languages are quality time and words of affirmation. And a few years ago, quality time was number 1, and then words of affirmation was secondary, but I feel like I want to retake it because I'm like, words of affirmation are really big for me too. That's part of the reason why like criticism is hard, and like how I always wanted my mom's verbal approval. It's like just to hear that I did a good job with something means so much, because I felt like I didn't get it as much as I wanted as a little kid. And because I felt like I got more criticism than affirmations, or maybe I just picked up on it more. Like, that's the other thing too. Like, as you're so biased as a person that like you filter out a lot of the good things. And so it's like, many of us do, not all of us. Some people are better at that than others. But for me, it's like, for whatever reason, it's like I notice, I think maybe it was because I was trained to, right? Like, I feel like my mom probably is the same way. My mom would filter everything, and it's like she'd find out where something went wrong. She'd always point out when I was doing something wrong. If I was doing something great, she would still, and maybe this is my aha moment, because I'm like, whoa, I must have learned that from my mom. Like, my mom would always look for the mistakes. She would always look for, you know, what was wrong in a given situation. So we obviously model our behavior after unconscious grooming. Oh, that's such a good terminology. I love that. Yeah, I maybe either it was a modeling of my mother, meaning I picked up on like, oh, this is how you operate in the world. You look for everything that's wrong in the situation, and you disregard all the good things, right? You don't even take them into account or something, or they become very minimal. It's fascinating. It's really fascinating. Okay, so on to my big thing that I'm doing now, which I'm super excited about, is I started this at the beginning of this year. I created this routine for myself, a morning and a night routine, beyond like brushing your teeth and like whatever else. Like, it was like a high performance routine. And I just started it up again today. I kind of started yesterday, but today was like my official first day, which is good on a Monday. And basically, you're going to learn about it if you watch my upcoming video on the main channel, which will probably be up on Thursday, if I were to guess. Maybe a little later. I don't know. It's a sponsored video, so it has to go through the approval process. But knowing myself, Thursday or Friday is when it'll come out, and it outlines, or will outline, because I haven't finished it yet, everything that I do to kind of set myself up for success every day. And one of those things is tapping. And it's something that I just want to kind of give myself some time to experiment with and seeing if that helps me identify and release old trauma and pain and blocked energy, limiting beliefs, all of those things, which are all kind of the same thing ultimately. So we'll see. I'm exercising again. I haven't really exercised in months, and I think a lot of energy gets stored and blocked as a result of that. And yeah, I'm just like, you know, getting myself, kind of putting myself like a private trainer, like having that routine, I think is something that I really need. And when I'm not, I feel most comfortable when I have a plan and a schedule and checklists and all that other stuff. Like I feel like I can accomplish things and keep everything organized. So I'm excited to be back into that. I just don't know how long it'll last. The last time that I stopped that routine was because I got overwhelmed with other things and I got thrown off while I was traveling for business. And I'm traveling 2 times next month. One time I'm going to Mexico next week. I'm really excited about it, but also kind of dreading it because it's just like, I want to just relax, but I'm possibly getting involved with a big project starting next week too. And I don't know, I'm trying to debate whether to take on a big project or not, in addition to all my other projects. And then in about a month from now, I'll be in New Orleans both of these are for weddings. So I really want to enjoy them, but it kind of makes me nervous to travel because I feel thrown off by travel so much. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. All I can focus on is this moment and this day. So thank you guys for tuning in and watching these long videos. Thank you for those of you that were here live and sharing your feedback and all of that. Thank you for being part of my journey, and thank you for opening your own hearts and minds and reflecting things back to me. I love hearing about how these apply to your own lives and journeys. Like, hearing from you is so comforting when I know that you guys can relate to what I'm going through. And if you do have suggestions, like, I just ask for now, considering how sensitive I am and my tendency is to just focus on criticism and sometimes consider things as criticism even when they're not. Just trying your best to be gentle, because I know that I'm so sensitive. It's like, I don't want to be sensitive, honestly. Like, that's what part of the reason want to work through this is because it's uncomfortable to be really sensitive. You know, it's not good to be so self-critical and doubt yourself so much. But it's basically unraveling many, many years of programming and habits, emotional habits. So it's it's kind of like gaining weight, right? Like, a lot of people gain weight because of emotions and all that other stuff, but like we have somehow been trained in our society to think that like we can lose weight really fast. But if you've ever tried to lose weight, unless it's like something really simple, like sometimes it's like, oh, like you're allergic to this, like no wonder you've gained weight. Like when I stopped eating gluten, my body was like, thank goodness, and like all this weight came off, and it was like, oh, I just had to switch one thing and it would be easier for me. I have a lot of food sensitivities, and it's like those cause inflammation. But I feel like so much of my body issues are tied into emotions. I feel like a great majority of people's body issues are very based in emotions, because like whether it's direct or indirect, right? For example, I know someone that has really bad dandruff, and the dandruff, I started researching, it's like all connected to like foods that you're eating, lifestyle choices, and those foods and lifestyle choices are often related to emotional things, whether it's stress, and stress is related, it's like this, again, domino effect, right? Like all of this stuff, this is why I want to get to the root of it and clear it for myself and for you guys. It's like, how amazing can we be if we can be as free from all these old traumas? We can identify them and work through them, release them. Like, imagine like what's stored in my body with all of this emotion. It's crazy. It's really crazy. I read a book, I don't know where it is, but I do have a book, I think it's a physical copy, about like the role that our weight has, our emotions have in our weight. And it's like, it seems so far-fetched, but it's, if you really think about it, like a lot of our decisions are based in our emotions, right? It sounds obvious and far-fetched at the same time, but everything we decide to eat often ties into emotions, our exercises, our lifestyle choices, like all that stuff. It's like programming, emotions, all this stuff. So, man, it's like, if you can unravel that, like, you set yourself up for success in so many ways, and it's kind of exciting to me, because I don't want to have to carry it around anymore. I don't want it getting in my way. And I doubt that you guys do either. So you are welcome to be part of this journey. That's the whole reason this channel exists, is showing you what I'm working through and hopefully inspiring you guys to work through it as well. Let me address a few more live comments before I wrap things up. Diane, thank you for being here and your ongoing support. Ted says, thank you for sharing and awakening to something about why I am what I am. You're absolutely welcome, Ted. And is it Katrina or Katarina? It's a beautiful name, whatever it is. You reminded me of the book, The Art of Extreme Self-Care. Ooh, that sounds really good. I don't have anything to write it down with, but hopefully The Art of Extreme Self-Care. That sounds like an amazing title. I'm such a book nerd. Ugh. I need to learn how to speed read, because there are so many books that I want to read. It's kind of nuts. All right, you guys, that's it for today. I aim to do these videos every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific. I don't see why I won't be on schedule next week. I may be in San Diego. I'll probably be in San Diego next Monday, but I don't know what time I'll be home. So hopefully I will be on schedule with this video. And then the week after that, I'll probably be home right after Mexico, but I also, may be incredibly exhausted. Usually that doesn't stop me, but I also might be working on this big project. We'll see. But my goal is Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific. So I love having you guys here live. I love seeing your comments on the recordings, and I'm just so grateful for each and every one of you. Which reminds me, another big part of my high performance routine is to reflect on the good things that happened, because that's training my brain to focus on the good things and not the bad. So hopefully that'll create better habits for me. All right, till next time, thank you guys. Bye.